Hey, it's Coach Taylor from SmarterTeamTraining.com. I'm going to be very honest, as I feel like I am on every episode on the show. I reached out to Garrison Draper on LinkedIn, and I've said this many, many times on the show. Use social media, use professional development clinics and conferences, etc., to really enhance your networking within the field. Ask two primary questions. What do you know now that you wish you knew then? And what has worked for you as a way to initiate a conversation that is non-confrontational, and you will be shocked at the amount of doors that open for you with some incredible people. And I don't care what level they work at. Garrison and I have not even gotten on the phone until roughly probably 5 minutes before the show started. He's working with the youth level all the way up to the MLS level. And I don't know much more about him other than what is on his LinkedIn profile. To be very honest, again, with everybody in the show here. So I organized some questions. I obviously organized my thoughts and sent it to him, so he has a little bit of a prepared dialogue and knows a little bit of the topics that we're going to talk about. But I'm looking forward just to having an open conversation with a professional late on a Thursday evening after a long day of training. And again, the good ones are going to make time to give back to others in the field, and myself included. If anybody reaches out to me, I want to reach out, and I'm sure Garrison will say the same because his actions have already indicated that. So, Garrison, man, I don't know how much more I can do to blow you up here as far as get people excited to listen to you here, my man. It's an honor to have you on the show here, big dog. I'm looking forward to just talking about several topics within the soccer realm and learning what has worked for you, my man.
Yeah, Coach. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited, and let's get started.
Hey, before we get started with the dialogue, the Q&A, and again, I looked at your profile, and that's about all I know about you. I didn't do anything more than that. I'm going to go a little deeper. I want to know, where's your passion for the field come from? I know you're doing some science-type stuff with people. You're not just doing necessarily only strength and conditioning. I mean, walk me through a little bit about what you're doing now and really what gets you excited about getting up in the morning and going to work.
I think what's really driven me in the field is always wanting to know more. I want to know, I don't want to just know how far did someone run during a game. Like, that's really easy. I want to know, how do we get them to go further, and what makes this guy go further than that guy, or what makes that guy go faster, and sort of everything that goes into that. Like, we have our training day. We're on the training pitch for about 2 hours, and there's so much that goes into that. Guys are covering 6,000 meters during a training session. They're doing X amount of high-speed running, and then they're coming in and they're doing their workouts. They're doing their recovery modalities. There's so much that goes into it, and I've just always been a person that just wants to ask, like, why this, why that? And that's really what's driven me to get to where I am now.
You know, I'm talking with a soccer guy. I got to lead with the fitness topic, the conditioning requirements, the agility that's involved from many aspects. I mean, soccer is a very complex game, and people who don't know the game very well just think it's guys running up and down the field, and it's you got to be pretty athletic. You got to be very fit. You got to be very dynamic in your movement patterns. I mean, walk me through how important is conditioning for soccer players, and then how do you suggest enhancing conditioning levels? Are you monitoring players during games, again, at the youth, the college, or the international, or excuse me, the MLS type level? How are you providing feedback to the coaches to maybe change up or adjust practices? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into really enhancing the conditioning attributes of a player and the many aspects of fitness as a whole: sprinting, distance, jumping, landing, the strength components. I mean, I know it's a very broad question, but walk me through that concept of how you guys prepare your athletes.
We use a system called Catapult, which I feel is sort of like the Cadillac of GPS units and accelerometers. What this allows us to do is dive in and look at exactly what every single player on the field does during a training session. And I've been fortunate enough now in a couple of my experiences to have been able to track players while they play a game. And what that's given us is we know what the end result is. We know this is about how far an athlete should run during an MLS match. We know this is about how fast someone needs to run to play in an MLS match. So all of our training is then worked back from the game. So now I can say, all right, here's a new athlete in our training environment. Let's watch them train. Let's track them a little bit. And I can say, all right, we know a central midfielder needs to cover between 120 and 140 meters per minute. Does this player do that during a training session? All right, checks that box. We know that every single player on an MLS field will hit 7.0 meters per second at least once during a game. Now, the really skillful guys, they might only do it once. Our really athletic guys, they might do it 10 to 15 times during a match. But every single one of them does it at least once. So now I can watch this athlete and we can go back to the data and we can say, all right, this player can reach that speed and he can go 2 meters per second faster than that. Then we're saying, all right, he checks that box. So we're able to really dive in and look at these athletes and understand what's going on the training pitch and how does it compare to what we're going to expect them to do on the field in a game.
When you get an athlete that walks into your facility, your team, your organization, how do you walk them through the preparation, we'll call it the pre-training work? Are you taking them through screening programs? Are you max testing the VO2 type stuff? Are you max heart rate testing them? Are you beat testing them? I mean, walk me through a little bit of that. What kind of screening are you doing? I don't mean just the movement stuff, but maybe that's included into it. But I mean, walk me through not necessarily just only the conditioning side of things, or not just only the movement side, but how are you evaluating players to hopefully identify some weak links of their body, or to help develop unique or individualized programs to really enhance their athletic traits?
The first thing we always do is we assess how do they move in a really controlled environment. And at the first team level, we like to use the FMS. And that's just a really simple way to say, yes, he can move, his joints can move in the right ways and in the proper ranges of motion, and it all sort of combines together to look really good. So that's step one. If there's any issues there, then we might send him to our PT, who will dive into some of those issues. So if he scored a 1 on the inline lunge, then our PT is going to sit down and say, all right, let's dig in a little bit. Like, have you had some previous injuries? Anything like that. Then we're going to dive in and sort of say, all right, this is going to be a big red flag for us. How can we improve this? And what should we be watching out for when we're training? So he passes all of his movement screens. Then we get him out on the field. And we know soccer is an absolute sport. Just like with your last question, we know there's certain thresholds each of our athletes need to meet. Our right backs need to do a certain amount of work. Our center backs need to have a specific skill set. Our central midfielders need to have a certain capacity. And so our testing battery sort of changes from athlete to athlete based on their role. And so we'll take a central midfielder because they're fun, because they run all the time. So we're going to put them through a repeated sprint test where we're looking at how much, not so much how fast can they run. That is important. Like, we know there's that minimum threshold, but we want to see how much does that speed change from rep 1 to rep 5. And that can really help us understand how is he going to fit into the system, and can he cope with the needs of our league, which is a fairly physical league.
I want to talk about an unfortunate word called injuries. What are some common injuries that you see in soccer players? How are you developing something into your program that hopefully can minimize that? I hate talking about injury prevention programs. I don't want to use that catchphrase, scare tactic. I don't want to use that. But there's got to be some areas of the body that have shown to be a little more susceptible to injury. I mean, how do you develop that into your program? And walk me through that maybe a weekly schedule, that before game, after game kind of strategy, and how you're just attacking each player individually.
Yeah, our approach to injuries is not so much injury prevention as it is performance. Our goal is to get our athletes to perform, and if we're getting them strong enough to perform, we feel that the injuries will start to diminish a little bit. And that's sort of the work that my colleague Bill Knowles and myself have really been focused on, is how do we make our athletes really resilient? How do we make them bounce back from an injury quicker, but then also how do we make them sort of rubberize to these little injuries? So the way we sort of periodize our week is we're trying to balance some different loads. There's a couple different mechanical loads that we place on players during soccer training. There's the really tight spaces we're putting a lot of stress on adductors, on the ankles, on the knees, and in my environment, and then also in my mentor Dave Tenney's environment, we sort of consider that body load. So we're looking at how many high-intensity accelerations, decelerations. We're looking at player load from catapult. We're looking at IMA from catapult, which is a way we can monitor changes of direction and forces going into the ground in specific directions. And those are all really important for our body load metric. And we can say, all right, this number will get really high when we play games like 3v3 or 4v4 or 1v1. The other part of our training periodization is called velocity load training. And this is just the opposite. So we're opening up spaces. We're going to stress the hamstrings a little bit more. We're going to stress the glutes, the quads. And what we're really hoping to get out of this velocity load training is some high-speed running. So we're getting some sprinting. We're getting some like 75 to 80% runs. And this is really important that we manage these. This is sort of like that, like the really simple concept in strength training of we're training my biceps on Monday and we're training our triceps on Tuesday. So that's similar concept where we're going back and forth and trying to balance those two so there isn't an overload on one side. When we do see those overloads, we tend to see injuries sort of trending in that direction. So if we have a lot of body load for a couple weeks in a row, yeah, those groin injuries start to pick up a little bit. When we have a lot of velocity load and we do a lot of high-speed running, because our athletes aren't trained as world-class sprinters, we start seeing those little hamstring injuries a little bit more.
For those that don't know the game of soccer all that well, some of the players should be running 7, 8, 9, 10 miles in a 90-minute match. That's not really necessarily that difficult. What they're doing, though, is sprinting and jogging primarily, and that's a big toll on the body, and let alone holding off defenders or offensive players and adjusting the balls in the air and striking balls, etc. My question has always been, how long does it take a soccer player to recover after a game, and how long until you begin training after competition? Are you strength training in the next day and then running in the day, 2 days after? Are you guys a flush them out the day after? Maybe even stuff you're doing right after the game. Are you bringing them in? Something we did with baseball, we brought the starting pitcher in the lift the same night. Are you taking these guys through strength workouts the same night of games? Again, walk me through that behind-the-scenes type thing as far as your weekly schedule, please.
Our schedule is pretty nice because on a typical week in the MLS, we're playing on a Saturday night, and then our next match is next Saturday. There's a few times sprinkled in there where we might play like a Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. Out of the 34 to 36 weeks we have matches in the MLS, I'd say 8 to 12 of those weeks are where we have those sort of double fixtures. So our typical week looks sort of like this. Saturday we play the match. Guys are running anywhere between 10 and 13 kilometers. They're covering anywhere between 75 and possibly 250 meters of high-speed running. So we tend to give the next day off. And this is a day where we tell our athletes, look, this is your time to recover. This is your time to relax. This is your time to get off that regimented routine of, I need to eat really healthy. We have to remind them, look, you just burned a lot of calories. You're allowed to go out and maybe eat something you normally wouldn't or enjoy something. This is your recovery day. The next day is our first day back from training. That would be like a Monday on a typical week. And we're starting the regeneration process. I put quotations around that. You couldn't really see that because we're on the phone. And our regeneration process isn't laying around on the ground and doing some stretching. Our job is to get them ramped up for the next week. And so we're going to do a little bit of interval work. They're typically going to have some kind of lift. And all of this is to sort of create the correct physiologic environment. So we're trying to stimulate the right hormones that come in and sort of help with the repair process. This is a really low volume session, and the intensity is fairly high. We're shooting for in the 75 to 90% range when we're doing some of our intervals. And that's just so we create that correct environment. We want to produce some testosterone. We want to produce the human growth hormone, which all comes from some of those higher intensity activities. From there, we start getting back into our training week. So Tuesday, Wednesday on a Saturday to Saturday schedule is the bulk of our training. And we're going to do a couple sessions that week where we're hitting anywhere between 4,500 and 6,500 meters. And that's where we sort of balance the velocity load and the body load. So one day we're going to hit some big open spaces. We're going to try and hit some high-speed running. And then the other day we're going to try and flip it. And we're going to close down spaces, and we're going to do the opposite. And that's just our sort of way of balancing the two stresses and not overloading one side of the spectrum. And then from there we get into our game prep. It's our weekly taper, and then Fridays is our game prep.
This time of year we got a bunch of high school, middle school athletes going back, even college athletes going back for that matter. And I'm sure hopefully they've done all their running and all their lifting programs. Hopefully they got a chance to get involved with some soccer over the summer. But those athletes that have not, the ones that have not even struck a ball, I just feel like sometimes when we're designing performance programs, I don't think we're necessarily designing a progressive ball striking program for soccer players. I mean, if it was a baseball pitcher, they'd have a pitching program to make sure their arm was ready. But we don't look at soccer the same way as far as preparing the hip flexor and quad complex, or the hamstring for that matter, groin, and what it takes to just strike a ball. I mean, do me a favor and walk me through that creative flexibility type program. And then even if you guys have or implement in a youth program a ball striking program to really prepare the lower body in particular for the rigors of ball striking.
The youth program is actually a really unique beast in that we do, I have to say so myself, but I really do believe we do a phenomenal job of preparing these athletes. These guys, last year is a great example. They started on August 18th, was their first day of preseason, and our U16 team went off to the national semifinals and played their hearts out for that weekend, and that was on July 18th. So they played for 11 straight months. We had a 3 or 4 week break in January, but a lot of guys were still training with national teams and doing all that. So when we're in our off season, we're giving them a lot of, hey, take your time, go on vacation, be a kid. And then we're implementing some flexibility work, but a lot of it is actually built into our training program. And at our facility, we have an awesome staff. And one of our strength and conditioning coaches is actually a gymnastics coach. And so she has done a phenomenal job of programming gymnastics straight into our training program. And that has done wonders for the whole program, and our kids' athleticism has improved. They're sort of, I don't like to use the word core, but their torso and all that is extremely strong. They're a little bit more resilient and a little more bendy, and then there's the flexibility that comes with gymnastics that's just awesome. So we build that straight into the program, and it's something that they can't skip because it's part of their training day every single week.
I want to talk about the weight room and weight room only, and I want to talk about strengthening joints, strengthening muscles. Do you want to argue about strengthening bones through that weight training aspect even? What is the most important area for a soccer player to strengthen? Do you got 1 or 2 different areas that really are an emphasis of yours within your program?
I think the biggest thing for a soccer player to do is to get strong. There's so many just misnomers about soccer playing athletes, and it's that, they're the weak ones. I saw a great meme the other day of some rugby players, and they were big, strong, and then they said, and then under it said, there's the soccer player, and there was a picture of Tinkerbell from Peter Pan. And I hope to squash that nomer very soon. And so I would recommend, if you're going to do one thing in season, off season, throughout the year, it's going to be keep up with your strength work, because it's only going to help you throughout the season.
I know you get a chance to work with a bunch of different professionals within the organization, from the sports medicine team to the strength conditioning coaches to the sport coaches. I don't know, you guys might even have sports psychologists or massage guys that come in, physical therapists, athletic trainers. Everyone has their own title kind of thing. I mean, when you're talking about a professional organization, or now even in colleges and even some high schools are starting to really expand their support staff for their coaches and the players that they get a chance to put on their jersey for the institution or the school. I mean, how important is the communication between the sports medicine team, the strength coach, and the sport coach? I mean, how often are you going out of your way to have meetings with the head coach, your staff, the people you work directly with, and also how often or how many times are you conveying or communicating back to the player about where they stand physically?
My role as the director of performance for the club is to be that bridge between the medical and the strength and conditioning and then the soccer staff. So I'm in the head coach's office speaking with the head coach at all times. My role is to be there and be his sort of voice and the medical and the performance staff's voice towards the coach and say, this is the plan that we have. This is how we're going to implement it. How can we help it tie into the soccer training that you're going to do for the day? And that's how it works from our first team all the way down to our U12s. So when I'm working with the academy teams, it's the same process. I'm the one speaking with the head coaches, and we're sharing ideas, and we're working towards the same goal. And it's my role to sort of figure out, hey, how can I fit this work, this strength work, or this flexibility work into your session? And we have a good weekly flow, so we sort of know, Mondays and Thursdays, we're going to get a lift in, and we're going to manage volume, we're going to manage intensity, and we just want everything to sort of flow into the session. So everything we do as a medical and a performance team supports what they're doing on the field.
I know at the top of our conversation here, you talked about catapult, and I want to go down this concept of technology. Soccer seems to be a very forward-thinking, technology-embracing type of sport, from the sports science side of things to even putting cameras in venues, especially in Europe and overseas. USA is starting to grab a hold of that, I think, in the NBA and the NFL more and more and more. But the technology side, as far as monitoring the biofeedback of players from heart rate and beyond, I mean, how has that enhanced your program? How has it enhanced your programming? And what are you using to stay ahead of the competition here? I mean, again, we talked about catapult, but are there other tools that you're using on a regular basis to really give your guys an edge?
Catapult has been a huge addition to our program, and it's actually really interesting when you sit down and speak with our coaching staff, from our U12 coach all the way up to our first team manager, and Catapult hasn't blown anyone away. So it's not like I'm coming back and completely flipping everyone's thoughts on its head. It's typically the coach and I will sit down and we'll say, what did you think of that session? And I say, I didn't think that part of the session was really good. I thought that was sort of slow, and I can say, the data agrees, that part of the session we really saw a dip in the work rates of players. What do you think happened there? So there's really good discussions that comes out of the technology, which I think is valuable. Another huge thing that we've really gotten into at the Philadelphia Union is video technology. And I have two amazing colleagues that do a lot of the performance analysis for the club, and we've found some really interesting results just from that. So a couple of games we've coded just watching players on the field, and whenever a player slipped, we would code it. So I can go back and watch those guys slip. And what we started to find is players who are relatively weaker tended to slip more often. And so there's that direct correlation between what we do in the weight room and what's happening out on the field. And so these are great things that I can sit down with the player and say, look, if you're skipping your stuff in the weight room, this is what we found. So there's that immediate feedback back and forth between the player and myself, and then also the coaches and myself as we're planning training or as we're evaluating our performance on the weekend.
A lot of times when we get a chance to sit down with a strength coach or a head soccer coach, for that matter, we're going to talk about all-season training. They're probably going to give you a little bit about their testing and what they want done during the preseason. And then when you get into the in-season aspect of it, you kind of sometimes they kind of get drifted away during the conversation. Not that it's not a priority, but there's other things that come up in the sport coach's mind. And I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing for the late season prep. I mean, how do you know when to pull back or to push your athletes, or even for that matter, even to challenge the coaches to up or pull back on the conditioning needs, the strength needs, addressing weak links, or even, how about this, one of the outside midfielders making a ton of runs in one game, and maybe they just need to be set out for a portion of practice just to allow them to help recover during the prep work during the week. I mean, walk me through a little bit of that late season conversation, how you approach coaches with it, and then kind of what information you bring with you, or I was going to say ammunition you bring with you into that meeting.
Yeah, so every morning our first team athletes fill out a survey through a website called After Action. And this survey will ask, how well did you sleep last night? How sore are you? How is your nutrition? How is your hydration? What's your mood like? And all this data sort of goes in, and we can sort of see, we can get a little snapshot of how that player responded to the training session or the past couple of weeks of training sessions. And from that information, we can sort of put athletes into buckets, and we can say, all right, this guy, he's played a ton of minutes over the past 6 weeks. He's still performing optimally, but he probably doesn't need as much work as our other guy over here who's played 5 minutes in 2 games over the past 6 weeks. So we can really start to figure out who needs what type of work, because that guy who's only played 5 minutes in the past 2 games, he might be called on in this run. Like our big week is coming, or our big month is coming up, and we have the Open Cup final at the end of September, and we still have I think we have 6 games between now and the Open Cup final, where we're going to need to utilize our whole roster to come in healthy and try and win that championship. So a big one is, how do we keep the guys who may not play as much fit, and how do we manage those guys who have been? So that literally comes down to understanding the needs of each athlete and having a coach who's flexible enough in his training planning to say, all right, this group of guys, they're going to go to this part of the session, and then they'll come out and they might do a little strength work, or they might go do some flexibility, or they might just shower up and go home. And then we have another group of guys who's going to do another 20 to 30 minutes of really high-intensity work to try and catch up on some of that fitness.
Well, Garrison, man, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you here. If anybody had any questions about any topics that were, just interested in finding out more information about what's going on and that type of stuff, and maybe they just need a little bit of a nudge as far as something to motivate them to just pursue more knowledge. I mean, what kind of motivational message would you have that, for them, whether they're trying to pursue the sports science angle, the strength conditioning angle, or even a sport coaching angle? I mean, kind of walk me through that path about what kind of inspired and motivated you, and what kind of message could you pass on to others?
I think the biggest one is never be afraid to call anyone. A great example of that is, I wanted to learn more about sleep and how it affects performance. And there's a wonderful researcher out at Stanford named Sherry Ma. And I literally Googled her phone number and called her in her office one day, and we sat and had a 2-hour conversation. So never be afraid just to reach out to someone and say, hey, I have a really quick question. And the good ones are always going to say yes. Or they're going to say, hey, let's set up a call for this time because this works really well in my schedule. And as long as you're willing to be a little flexible, the really good people are going to make some time to sit down and talk, because they love sharing their field just as much as anyone else does.
Okay, Garrison, man, it's been an honor to get a chance to talk to you, but definitely a privilege on my end. I was taking a bunch of notes as we were going through here, because I think a lot of this stuff is relevant for what we're doing right now. It's very timely. Soccer season's beginning. We're getting the college kids going into their programs and in their institutions. We got our high school programs getting going. We get our youth model with the middle school crew starting up here in a couple of days. And I think it's going to be a really timely message for a lot of people to listen to and really take hold. And also preparing for their off season. We're normally a season or two ahead. I mean, we've already got our winter program kind of outlined, and we're already thinking about what we want to do new for next summer. So hopefully this is a great conversation for many people to consider. If somebody wanted to reach out to you directly and find out more information about what you have going on, or to pursue maybe even more in-depth questions than what we even discussed here, I mean, how could they reach out to you and really just come in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the easiest way to get me is via email, and my email is gdraper@stroudsburg, PhiladelphiaUnion.com. And I'm also a bit of a Twitter junkie, so you can reach out to me. My Twitter handle is @GarrisonDraper. And then there's also my, I work with a really great group of sports scientists, reconditioning coaches, sports psychologists, and that's through HP Sports. And their Twitter handle is HP Sports _. And that's a really awesome Twitter page that sort of gives a lot of the information that we're sort of sharing and some of the ideas that we're sort of throwing out in the air at this moment.
Well, thanks for your time there, Garrison, man. I know you're a busy guy. Again, I know it's late on a Thursday night here when we're doing this phone call, and I don't want to keep you on the phone too long. I know you're a busy guy. You've been doing a lot of stuff throughout the day, and I want to make sure you get a chance to just unwind for a second. We're all getting ramped up for a busy fall season, and I'm looking forward to just learning from you, my man. Hopefully this is a launching pad for us to do many more things down the road. I know that you're getting an opportunity to speak out in Jersey. Hopefully we can get your schedule to work out. And that's where I'm looking forward to actually shaking your hand and learning from you, man.
Hey, Coach, it's been great. I look forward to the next time we get to talk.